Picture this. It's 1:43 in the morning. Rain quietly taps against your apartment window while the city outside slowly disappears into darkness. Your room is illuminated only by the pale glow of your phone screen. And somewhere between loneliness and emotional exhaustion, you make the mistake most men eventually make. You revisit old messages from someone you never truly recovered from. Someone who once made ordinary life feel meaningful. Someone whose voice still echoes inside your mind long after the relationship died. Brother, what I'm about to tell you is something most men only understand after emotional destruction changes them permanently. A man rarely becomes emotionally cold overnight. His nervous system adapts slowly, silently, painfully. And usually, it begins with one woman he trusted too deeply. Daniel understood that feeling perfectly. 3 months earlier, Ava disappeared from his life without warning. No closure, no final explanation, no dramatic goodbye, just silence. The dangerous thing about silence, my friend, is this. The human brain hates uncertainty. So eventually, it creates its own explanations. And most of the time, those explanations are built from fear. Daniel convinced himself Ava betrayed him because emotionally, betrayal hurts less than confusion. At least betrayal gives pain a clear enemy. The apartment around him now felt emotionally dead. One coffee mug, one toothbrush, one untouched side of the bed. Funny how heartbreak changes even ordinary objects. Every room begins feeling psychologically heavier, and slowly, loneliness becomes part of your biology. Your dopamine drops, your sleep patterns collapse, your brain chemistry shifts into emotional survival mode. That's the biological truth nobody warns men about. Emotional pain is not just emotional. Neurologically, your brain processes heartbreak through many of the same regions that process physical injury. Your nervous system literally treats betrayal like danger. That's why some men become emotionally numb after enough disappointment. Not because they stopped feeling, because their mind became exhausted from emotional bleeding. Then, suddenly, Daniel's phone vibrated. Unknown number. One new voicemail. At first, he almost ignored it, but something felt wrong. His chest tightened as he pressed play. Static, soft breathing. Then, her voice. Daniel? Everything inside him froze instantly, because the voice inside that message belonged to someone he hadn't heard from in 3 months. Ava, you probably hate me by now. Her voice sounded fragile, emotionally exhausted, like someone carrying invisible weight for too long. Then she said something that changed everything. There's something you never knew about that night before I left. Silence. Static. The voicemail abruptly ended. Daniel stared at the screen without breathing, because suddenly, nothing made sense anymore. Brother, every man believes he understands emotional pain until confusion enters the battlefield. Because confusion destroys people differently. It keeps the mind trapped between hope and resentment. Daniel replayed the voicemail again, and again, and again, searching for hidden meaning between every breath. There's something you never knew. His mind instantly returned to the final night they saw each other. The argument, the accusations, the emotional destruction. Ava standing near the doorway with tears in her eyes while saying, "You already decided who I am before hearing the truth." At the time, Daniel thought she was manipulating him. Now, he wasn't so sure anymore. Brother, modern relationships are psychological warfare disguised as romance. Every woman says she wants emotional openness. Until emotional insecurity enters the relationship, every man believes loyalty guarantees stability. Until fear poisons perception. That's where relationships begin collapsing. Not through hatred,
through emotional misinterpretation. Daniel remembered the warning signs now. Ava becoming emotionally distant, checking her phone nervously, losing sleep, avoiding eye contact. But instead of asking deeper questions, his brain searched for emotional threats. That's what insecure attachment does psychologically. The human mind begins scanning for evidence that confirms fear, confirmation bias, hypervigilance, emotional projection. Your brain becomes programmed to detect betrayal everywhere, even when it doesn't exist. And brother, once suspicion enters love, peace disappears completely. Case study after case study follows the same emotional blueprint. A man sees emotional distance and assumes disloyalty. A woman feels emotionally misunderstood and withdraws further. Both people become trapped inside defensive behavior, and slowly, communication dies before love does. That's the tragedy nobody talks about. Most relationships do not die because feelings disappear. They die because understanding disappears first. By 3:12 in the morning, Daniel was driving through rain-soaked streets trying to understand the voicemail. But emotionally, he was already collapsing internally. Because deep down, his intuition sensed something terrifying. What if Ava never betrayed him at all? Brother, what I'm about to tell you may sound uncomfortable, but all men are biologically hardwired to protect their emotional ego before protecting emotional truth. Why? Because emotionally, the male nervous system experiences rejection as status destruction. And status loss psychologically feels dangerous. That's why emotionally wounded men often become detached, defensive, emotionally reactive, hyper-independent, psychologically numb. Not because they are evil, because survival mechanisms activated. Daniel arrived outside the old cafe where they used to spend Friday nights together. Dark windows, empty chairs, silent memories. Some places carry emotional fingerprints long after people leave them. And standing there, Daniel slowly began noticing things he ignored before. Ava wasn't emotionally distant because she stopped loving him. She looked terrified, exhausted, like someone silently fighting battles she couldn't explain. But Daniel never saw pain. He only saw emotional withdrawal. Brother, this is where modern culture destroys relationships. Social media teaches people to assume the worst instantly. Dating culture rewards emotional detachment. Pride replaces communication. Fear replaces patience. And suddenly, people stop listening to understand. They listen only to defend themselves emotionally. That's exactly what happened to Daniel. The next morning, Daniel called Mia, Ava's closest friend. At first, she refused to speak, but after hearing about the voicemail, everything changed. Then she said something that made Daniel's stomach drop instantly. Ava never cheated on you. Silence. Daniel felt the room physically spin. What? Mia explained everything slowly. Ava's younger brother had fallen into serious gambling debt. Dangerous people began threatening him. So Ava secretly borrowed money and started meeting someone connected to those debts. Daniel accidentally witnessed one of those meetings, and emotionally, his brain connected the dots incorrectly. That single misunderstanding poisoned the relationship permanently. Brother, sometimes emotional destruction begins from one false assumption repeated long enough. Ava spent weeks trying to defend herself emotionally, but eventually, she became exhausted, because constantly proving your loyalty to someone you love slowly destroys your spirit. Daniel sat speechless, because his entire version of reality suddenly collapsed. For months, he mourned betrayal that never actually existed, and that realization broke him psychologically. Days later, Daniel recovered the missing voicemail audio. He sat alone in darkness before pressing play again. Rain outside, same apartment, same silence. Ava's voice returned softly through the speaker. If you're hearing this, then maybe part of you still remembers us. Daniel lowered his head. I knew you think I betrayed you. Her breathing trembled slightly. But eventually, I got tired of defending my loyalty to someone who stopped listening to me. That sentence hit harder than anger ever could, because deep down, he knew it was true. You stopped hearing me long before we stopped loving each other, brother. That's the bitter truth most emotionally exhausted people eventually realize. Love alone is never enough. Without emotional understanding, love slowly suffocates inside fear. Ava continued, pain changes people. Fear changes people. Maybe we both became strangers trying not to get hurt. Daniel closed his eyes. Then her final words arrived quietly. I hope one day you learn that assumptions destroy people faster than distance ever will. Static. End of message. No dramatic breakdown. No screaming. No emotional explosion. Just silence. The kind of silence that forces a man to confront himself honestly for the first time. Weeks later, Daniel returned to the cafe one final time. Morning sunlight passed softly through the windows. And strangely, for the first time in months, the memories no longer felt painful. They simply felt human. Beautiful. Temporary. Fragile. Brother. Emotional maturity begins when resentment finally loses control over perception. Daniel finally understood something most men learn too late. Emotional strength is not becoming cold. It's learning how to control fear before fear controls your decisions. Because emotionally reactive men destroy peace everywhere they go. But emotionally aware men? They learn to pause before assuming, listen before accusing, understand before emotionally withdrawing. That is masculine emotional mastery. Daniel never deleted Ava's photos, never erased the messages, because healing is not forgetting. Healing is finally making peace with what happened. And as he stood to leave, his phone vibrated once more. For a brief second, his heart stopped instinctively. But this time, it was only a spam notification. Daniel smiled quietly to himself, then walked away. And somewhere inside the silence of that ordinary morning, he finally let her go. Because some people leave your life loudly, others leave quietly, through misunderstanding, distance, silence, and words you hear far too late.